Okay, so here we are. It is July 19th, and we're going to start talking about the metal phase, which will transition into in a couple weeks in the end of July. So the metal phase is associated with the organs of the lung and the colon. The season is autumn, and the direction of the energy is descending, condensing, concentrating. Remember, we hit the peak of yang at the summer solstice, and now the energy is declining toward the winter solstice. So there is sort of a contracting, drawing down and in that's happening. It's a little hard to relate to this time of year because it's so hot and can be so humid. So it's a little hard to be in touch with that, but that is just because the Earth's surface has warmed up so much. I'm going to move in the shade. The Earth's surface has warmed up so much that it's holding the heat, but the energy is declining nonetheless. So, let's see, what do we want to say about autumn? So, as the yang energy descends and the yin grows, we're coming into the first of the harvest season at August 1st. And you can see the sort of condensing and concentrating energy in the harvest because all the plants are making their fruit and seed. So it's their legacy plan, like what can we put in the smallest package possible to carry life forward into the next year. So the questions there for human beings are sort of like what is to be gathered and what is to be released. In older times when you didn't have a grocery store year round, you really had to figure out what you needed to bring in and store to get you through the winter. And you couldn't bring in extra stuff and store it because you just didn't have space. So there's a lot of decision about what is of the greatest value that is worthy of being stored for the winter. So the energy direction is everything is moving toward concentration and the storage of the essence. So flowers are making seeds and human beings are harvesting. Wind, sorry. And the garden is starts to die back and make compost. If you look around at this time of year, especially this year where it's been so dry, you'll see it. The plants just don't look so robust, and because the climactic action of the metal element is drying. So you'll start to see in early August, like just things drying out and yellowing, particularly like in the understory in the forest. And you'll even start to see a few red maples start to turn. And the plants are definitely beyond their peak bloom as we get into August. As a gardener, you're always trying to figure out like what can I get that will have some color in August. It's basically black-eyed Susans and echinacea because everything else is spent. Everything else has already made its seed and getting ready to hunker down for winter. So nature is making things more concentrated, less volume, and putting the greatest value in a tiny package. Like what could be more valuable than a seed? So the challenge and the opportunity is two-sided. It's the harvest and the decline. So we're pulling in what it is that we want to harvest from the fields. When we think about that in terms of our life, it's what is it that about the relationships and our workplace and the way that we spend our time that is valuable to us. And so in the autumn, we get to, reconsider those things. Like, what are we willing to continue to carry? Because in older times, getting things to be pretty simple in the fall, and as simple as you could, was going to be part of your insurance of survival for the winter. So it's a refinement, like what is the most valuable thing here? So what we can do in our, your most precious resource is your time. Um, how do you want to spend it? Who do you want to spend it with? Um, is it worth sinking life force energy into a job, a relationship, an art project? It's a time in the autumn we get to reevaluate all those things. And this decline is about loss, right? The full manifestation of the garden is on its way out, and so that energetically resonates in human beings with grief. Grief is an emotion that declines. It's in response to the loss of something valuable, in response to a relationship that we valued, or life circumstances that we valued. We have lots of reasons for having grief. And grief is a process of compost, right? It's a loss. But just like compost, I put this huge pile of stuff that's recognizable as different plants in my garden into the compost. And by springtime, it's not recognizable, but it's very valuable. So it's taking a form that it has had at this time, and transforming it through the composting process into something that's highly valuable, that can be used to nourish the next round of life. So that's the way grief is supposed to work. It's supposed to keep moving and composting. When it gets stuck, that's a problem that needs a little bit of help. The central issue of metal is attachment, what it is that support your life, what are your deepest values. Those are the things you want to hang on to, and you want to release the things that are sort of old identities that don't fit, any belongings, that you have that you don't use, stuff in your closet, whatever, relationships that are no longer feel like you're being nourished from them, anything that has completed its life cycle. It's time to release it. And it's interesting that the two organs associated with metal are the lung and the large intestine. So the lung is about inspiration and expiration. So, we breathe in life and we let go of life. So we have that rhythm in the way that the lung works. And the lung is our connection to the cosmic chi. It's how we bring in cosmic life force, universal life force into our body. It's via the lung. And the other organ is the large intestine, is the pairing. And it's interesting that what the large intestine is doing is letting go of what you can no longer use. After it kind of goes through the contents of your, the products of your small intestine for water and minerals and anything that's actually valuable, and then letting go the rest. And so when we see a lot of clutter in somebody's house, the inability to clean out a closet, it's akin to constipation, where you can't let go of stuff that's not serving you, and let somebody else use it or have it go to the transfer station, whatever. But when we have extra stuff in our house that is not useful, it is sort of emotional constipation. It ends up anything that we're keeping that we're not using and have a reason to keep requires some amount of our life force energy to maintain. And so, you can hold up a pair of jeans you haven't worn in 5 years and think, do I want to put any more life force energy into maintaining this thing in my closet. What I say to my kid who's paying, astronomical rent in Arlington, Virginia is, do you want to pay the rent on the space that that thing occupies? And, that is true physically. Anything you have in your house, you're paying for the space of, but also you're paying for it resource-wise, emotionally. The breath also reminds us, that you have to keep breathing. You inhale, you exhale. Life comes in, life goes out. You can't hold your breath. You can't not breathe for more than, I don't know, the maximum of a couple minutes. And life is like that. Things come, things go. Nothing is permanent. This is that teaching from Buddhism that everything is impermanent. Including us. We have a lifespan of whatever it is, roughly 80 years, and we get to decide how we want to spend this one precious life. So the character for the metal in the Chinese character script is the same as for the word gold. And so this reminds us that what we're doing there is kind of hanging on to what's of value, the gold, and letting go the rest. The virtue of the metal element is righteousness. So I don't mean the kind of righteousness like righteous indignation. Righteousness in this context is more like pure alignment, like you are receiving your inspiration. You have a clear channel to the divine, and you're able to live into that with integrity, without distorting it, in correct alignment. This is righteousness. The relationship between the lung and the heart, you think about it, they're kind of, the heart is nestled right into the lung, so it's the lung that carries the heart's wisdom into the action in your life. So the questions for the fall that you might ask yourself are, how do you want to spend your time? What is true to me? What is valuable? What matters the most? What is mine to do and what is not mine to do? The emotions of metal, when they're out of balance, it's grief that's not changing or composting that gets stuck. It can be a certain type of melancholy or sadness. I think we can be sad about a loss or have grief about a loss, but it has to be transforming, just like compost does, where it's going from being recognizable plant material to a pile of soil in the spring. That loss has to continue to compost to become the new soil of something new in your life. So when the emotions are in balance, you're feeling inspiration, you're in connection with poignancy, something that is, you recognize you're touched by it. You're like, your heart is touched by it because you recognize its value, inherent value in your life. And emotionally, it's working well when you are very clear about your own values. So you have your own good boundaries around how it is you're going to spend your time and where you're going to invest your resources. It's important to remember that grief is basically the outbreath of love. So, if the fire energy, summer energy is all about the heart, this is the spring and summer are the big in-breath, and then the autumn and winter are the out-breath. So grief is the beginning of the out-breath of the season that brought us the connection to the heart and love. The gift of metal is basically hidden treasure. Autumn energy invites us to kind of discover what cannot be lost. So, in other words, these are the things that you're on your deathbed, um, having no regrets, and basically that you loved well, that you were a presence in the world that was important to other people, that you had a meaningful life, um, that you've gained some wisdom and been able to share it with whomever's, maybe it's your children, grandchildren, or maybe it's like this kind of forum where I'm just sharing um, the point of view of the Chinese medicine seasonal wheel, whatever it is. Those are the things. I had a teacher who used to say, the only things that are of true value are what cannot be lost in a shipwreck, what you cannot lose in a shipwreck. That's poignant, actually, to think about. Like, what is it that you couldn't lose in a shipwreck? Um, that's that is what we're working on with the gift of metal. Now, as human beings, we're going to struggle with that. We're going to struggle with all kinds of things that could be lost in a shipwreck, losing all kinds of things that could be lost in a shipwreck, including people, loved ones. But when we're talking about the sort of purity of metal, it's like the trees do not weep over losing their leaves. And, we're not trees, so we don't respond to it that way. And remember, we started this conversation about how the metal is about attachment, and human beings get attached, and that's just sort of part of what it is to be human. But we get to, this time of year, start thinking about, okay, where are my attachments and how are they beneficial, and do I want to, what can I let go of so that I can make room for something else? This is um, somebody who's a hoarder, for example, would be a physical example of somebody whose metal element is not working right. And so you literally can't even move in their house because it's stacked to the ceiling with whatever crap they have. And so your emotional body and your closets and wherever else you can think of get so full of emotional crap and physical crap that you don't have room for anything new. So that's the opportunity of um, the autumn, is to let go. We can think about all of that, all of the things that we need to let go of, as sort of, harvesting with gratitude. Is there a way? So my daughter-in-law has a thing about shoes. She probably has 100 pair. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Some of them are 2 pairs of the same shoe. She liked them so much she bought 2 pairs. I don't identify with that at all, but it's definitely an emotional constipation problem. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to, like, can we photograph the shoes so that you can remember whatever the sentimental attachment is to each pair of shoes without it renting space in this very expensive but small apartment. Um, so that would be a metal move, right? You're condensing it down into the thing that is most valuable. If it's the most valuable thing is the memory of these pair of shoes and where you wore them or whatever's associated, do you actually need the pair of shoes, or can we take a picture and have a photo album of shoes and the memories associated with it? So, and then let them go and let somebody else wear the shoes. Have some grace about how we release things, be graceful about letting things go in our lives. And really protect what is of true importance to us, the things that you can't lose in a shipwreck, what it is that you're going to worry about on your deathbed. Those are the things that we want to protect and store. So that's it, my little thing on the metal.